Hello everyone and welcome to the latest This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. I'm Dustin, and this week was a very how do I put this? There's a lot of things that happened this week. It was a very busy week, and there was not a lot of money coming in, but we'll get to that in a second. If I had to round out the name of this week, it would be lots of estimates and trying not to fall behind and completing working on a large project, I guess would be the best way to put it. Those are pretty much the summary of what happened this week. So just to give you a slight breakdown of the week. So we had a pretty big property turnover that we were working on. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's not extremely close, but it's not extremely far away. It's like about 40 minutes with traffic away from our shop. And it was a pretty big project. I'm not going to give the numbers because we didn't finish it this week, but let's just say it was over $5,000. I'll give you the file number next week when we hopefully wrap everything up. But this is not a small job by any means. It's a relatively large job, but the problem is that it requires a lot of different moving parts. There was a lot of different punch list items, minor repairs here and there that need to be completed, in addition to doing a full clean out, doing a full we painted almost practically the entire house. There's a lot to do. So the thing is, because there's so much going on, there's a lot of juggling. There's a lot of juggling. The plus about with the property turnover is that my helpers can be on site and be working, and I can still manage to get other things accomplished. So that kind of is what happened at the beginning of the week, before either the time that my helpers were available or the time that or just in general. I was trying to get small things done in the morning before I would go to the property turnover. There's a lot of moving pieces right now. I'm falling behind on getting a lot of estimates done. I'm going to have to probably spend my entire afternoon this weekend putting together estimates for some of these jobs that I haven't put together yet. Not because I don't want to do the work, but more because I'm starting to get concerned that these larger projects are going to get too big for me to be able to maintain, or I should say not maintain, but complete prior to my helpers being gone. And then I'm going to be in a scenario where I'm not going to have anybody but myself, and then I'm going to have all this work to try to get done, and it's just going to extend the schedule out even further. So it's a tough spot. I really need to find some additional people that are skilled. When I say skilled, I mean they can perform the electrical, the plumbing, the repairs like that. They have the mindset of how to make certain repairs, and they don't necessarily need to be directed. The helpers are great when it comes to painting or giving them a task that they can complete just by giving them a set of instructions. But there's certain things that they can't take care of, and that's the stuff that we need to have more oversight on when it comes to getting some of this stuff done. There's a couple of jobs that I looked at the beginning of the summer that at this point, if I quote them out, there's no way they're going to get completed before my helpers go back to school, and that's going to be a problem. At the same time, I could get the work done myself, but the issue becomes how long is it going to take if it's just me? Also, if it's just me, it's very unlikely I'm going to be able to do more than one job in a day based off of my schedule. I could either adjust my schedule or I don't know. It's an odd scenario, but the whole point is I have to find somebody here very soon to start balancing some of this stuff out. The other problem is, even if I find somebody here in the next couple of weeks, I still have to train them and get them set up to be able to actually go out and do these things. I've been trying over the past couple of weeks, putting together a lot of, I'm very data focused. Numbers mean everything when it comes to trying to make judgment calls on what things to do and what things not to do. The problem is that we are not extremely what's the phrase, the best way to put this? I'm not exactly flush with a large amount of cash. And one of the biggest problems with one of these jobs that you do for a property manager, and as extensive as it is that it ate up an entire week and I have no money coming in. And it could still be 2-3 weeks before that money comes in for this specific week, which that becomes a problem. You really have to have a good reserve, which I'm in the process of putting together a larger reserve to be able to maintain these situations. But there is going to be some problems here very soon where if I don't have money coming in, I can't keep paying people, or it's not that I can't keep paying people. I have money to cover payroll. It's not that. I need to be able to, if I'm to hire somebody, that is a couple of weeks where they're going to have to be working alongside me. And then if they're working alongside me, then I still have to pay them regardless. And they're paid at a different rate than the helpers. So I have to be able to get them out in the field relatively quickly while I'm still juggling a bunch of other jobs, while I'm still juggling the helpers, while I'm still juggling all this other stuff. So if there is one way to phrase the entire current mode, it's juggling. Just constant juggling. I probably got about 10 different items up in the air that I'm juggling. So let's dive into this week. So Monday we started off with a sump pump replacement. This was pretty straightforward. The only thing that was a hiccup was that it was like a 3 or 4 foot crawl space that you had to get into to get to the sump pump. The biggest issue with the sump pump was that it really wasn't an issue. It was more of, there was 2 things. One, I found out after the fact that the sump pump has a drain being fed into it, which leads from the laundry room. So the laundry room has a utility sink. The washer goes into the utility sink. The drain then connects down to a floor drain, which then connects down and then feeds into the sump pump pit. That sump pump pit was originally connected to a sewer, the sewer system, the waste out of the house. And at some point when it was replaced about 10 years ago, the plumber at the time disconnected it from that, ran a new pipe directly outside for it to be set up as a sump pump, for wastewater, the water underneath the house. But that is not the correct setup. So while I replaced the sump pump, I had to give a referral for a plumber because there's no way that is the correct setup. You're not supposed to be having wastewater from your laundry pumped out into your yard. That's a big no-no. However, the only other hiccup with the sump pump was that I had to order it, but I ordered it from a reliable supplier and they were able to get it to me like practically immediately. They shipped it, I think it was the same day that I ordered it, and it arrived like within 3 or 4 days, including the weekend days, which was really great. And the sump pump wasn't something that I could get in stores because she wanted a very specific brand. And overall, it was great. It was a good, easy job. The only thing that took a little bit longer on the job was that she was a talker, which there's nothing wrong with that. She was very nice. She gave me a lot of compliments based off of how my website's designed. She enjoyed the AI receptionist. She said that it was a very good receptionist compared to some of the other ones that she's encountered. She also said that she was very happy about the fact that we got back to her as soon as we did, because she had been relying on a plumber for 15 years and he's had some staffing issues and couldn't get to her anytime soon. So something like this is relatively simple. It doesn't take very much effort to make this to swap out a sump pump. So I'm happy to do sump pumps. I've done some here and there. It's not something I get a lot of calls for because I think a lot of people just assume you have to have a plumber, but really it's just taking the old one out, putting the new one in, and it's a couple of connections with the pipes or the discharge pipe, and making sure that the backflow, I can't remember the name of it, the backflow is installed properly, and you replace that. So all in all, that job was $575. Immediately after that, I went to the property that we are turning over. So the first day that we were there, it was basically just kind of gathering up what we actually needed to get done. Now, I had already done an inspection on this property in early June. To put this in perspective, we're about 6 weeks away, or 6 weeks past that initial inspection. The the property itself wasn't in horrible shape. It was kind of dirty and just normal wear and tear from someone living there for probably, over 5 years, to be honest. Some of this, there was a couple of things that were probably worse than others, but I was not instructed to mess with any of that stuff. There was a back room that initially had carpet. The carpet was in really bad shape. The owner of the property actually came in, or had somebody else come in and actually rip out the carpet and put in LVP. The bathroom tile in both bathrooms is cracked in various places. That is not something that I was really looking to do in the first place, but that was something that I had to bring attention to. There's a bay window on the front of the house. The actual the main, I guess, window sill, but it's much bigger than a sill, is extremely in bad shape. It just needs to be completely taken out and replaced. They didn't want anything done with that either. And then the walls in the back room also, they have some, it was basically, they had paneling and then they had wallpaper installed over the paneling. The wallpaper is peeling in a variety of different spots, does not look great. So I had given a suggestion for that as well, but they didn't want to, but that wasn't something that we were doing. So essentially what we were coming in to do was paint practically every room, paint the ceilings. There was some fixtures that were being replaced or updated, I guess is a better way to phrase it, because they were being replaced, but a lot of them were there was a lot of track lighting in the house from probably 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Install smoke detectors. There was a couple of other minor things, replacing exhaust, the bathroom exhaust fans. There was some closet doors that needed to be installed. Some racks coming out of one closet, just a standard rod and shelf installed. The front door was getting painted. There's a lot of miscellaneous things that need to get removed. There's a pull-out cabinet that needs to be repaired. There's a couple of drawers that had water damage, so we needed to install contact paper. One of the really big glaring cleaning issues was that the people who lived there prior must have done a lot of cooking, but there was grease all over the ceiling. There was grease all over the cabinets, all over the wall. They had an old style ventilation fan where you pull it and it just opens up a flap on the outside and pulls the air out directly outside. The issue with that was that it hasn't been cleaned in forever. So there was a lot of cleaning involved in that, and then trying to, get it so that you could not see any of the stains that were on the ceiling. So there was that. A lot of painting in general, to be honest. Caulking of the shower. There was a drain that needed to be replaced. We ended up replacing a toilet seat. Smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. There's a register vent. There's a slew of different things. But the idea was that the first day we were there, I was just trying to gather what actually materials we need to pick up the materials, so that way once I got there on Tuesday, I could immediately start taking care of some of the stuff that I could take care of. On the flip side, we had the helpers. They did an initial cleaning, which was really just getting everything wiped down so that way it was ready to be painted. And then immediately on Tuesday, they were coming in and starting to paint right away. Paint the ceilings, get things. We had to get a bunch of stuff uninstalled on Monday so that way we could start painting the ceilings right away on Tuesday. There was a couple of rooms where we needed to do a little bit more work. The room that needed the closet doors and the closet shelf, they needed to pull out the rack and then get that closet painted so we could get that stuff installed. There was a set of mirrors, these really tall mirrors, 2 of them attached to the wall. We had to get those mirrors removed. When we removed them, there was this horrible adhesive on the wall that we had to basically scrape off and then patch. There was a couple of other minor drywall patches that needed to get done that we just needed to get started, so that way they had time to dry before we needed to paint. So there's a lot of different things, but the whole idea on Monday was just to basically get everything set, pull out what needs to get pulled out, get everything wiped down, and start focusing on kind of the structure of how we were going to do things. The helpers were going to be at this property all week. That was a known up ahead. There was a couple of things that I had here or there that were going to get taken care of, but for the most part, that was the focus, was they were going to be there all week long. I would have occasional projects in the morning and then meet them after I get done with whatever I have going on in the morning. So that was basically Monday. The only other thing that happened on Monday was one of my existing good customers, who I've done a variety of different work for over the last couple of years. They called about an issue with their garage door. I ended up going out there. I didn't charge them anything because I couldn't do the repair myself. The cables that are wrapped around the drum had come completely undone, and the only way to do that is by redoing the retensioning the spring on the drums, and I don't have the materials to do that, nor do I have the expertise to do it. So I ended up giving them a referral to someone in a local LATIP chapter, not mine, but one of the other ones, and hopefully that got taken care of, but there was no cost associated with that on my end. Jumping over to Tuesday, the first thing I had to do was I had a estimate to look at. This was a referral that came in from a LATIP member, the gentleman who owns the restoration company. The customer had some water in her basement. They had to take out about 4 inches of drywall in this one finished bathroom in her basement. The rest of the basement's not finished, but there is a full bath down there that they did finish. So the drywall had to be taken out. So they basically had me come in there to quote the best solution to get the bathroom put back together. But then she also had a list of some other things. She had 2 drain stops in her bathroom, or in her upstairs bathrooms, that were not actually holding water. So the drain stops need to be replaced, or essentially the seals on them need to be replaced. There was an exterior door on the garage that needs to be replaced, and then there's a door for a storm door that needs to be replaced on the front of the house. So she had all of this stuff. I tried to taper her expectations because a lot of this stuff, like 1 door, 2 doors, it adds up pretty quick. But she was very adamant about trying to get it all done collectively. So that's one of the estimates I need to get sent out soon. But after that, I had a plumbing repair. This one was in the city, which we all know, if you've listened to me for a long time, how much I love going to the city. But it was actually relatively quick to get to. It was a straight shot on the expressway, and it was the expressway that doesn't typically have traffic. And then the only part that was kind of a bummer was when I got there. So this is a commercial building. The gentleman who owns the building, I've done a bunch of different works. He has some other rentals. Last week I did some rental work, or I did some work at a couple of his rentals. He has a bunch of commercial buildings in the city that he owns and rents out the spaces, and all the buildings have multiple units. So there's like 4 units per building. I've never actually worked at any of his commercial stuff in the city before, mostly because I always told him I couldn't go to the city. When he gave me the address, I looked it up, realized it wasn't too far away, and figured, well, if I can get some stuff here or there, it's not that big of a deal. Most of the time, there's not huge things, and he doesn't give me huge things. It's more of there's a toilet that's running in one of the units. That's one of the things I had to do this time. Or there's a leak underneath a sink or something like that. It's typically minor stuff. It's not like, hey, come in this unit and completely rebuild it kind of scenario. So that said, the unit was a clothing and accessory store. I think they sold more than just dresses. They sold a lot of different things. But there was the list of stuff that needed to get done was there was a toilet flapper that needed to be replaced. The tenant was complaining of low water pressure for the faucet. Outside of replacing the faucet, there's not much you could do. I tried cleaning the aerator. It helped a little bit, but not much. There's probably some buildup actually in the faucet itself, but I knew that Well, I knew and then confirmed with the owner that they did not want to replace the faucet, and he did not. And then the unit used to be rented by a aquarium shop, and they had there's a sink, kitchen break area, whatever you want to call it, but underneath the sink there was a tailpiece that they had put a saddle in for maybe a water filter or something like that, and that was leaking. So that needed to get replaced. And then the handle on the faucet in the kitchen needed to be replaced. So all of it was pretty straightforward stuff. The thing that took forever was, there's two things that ended up adding time. The first thing was that the owner was there on site. He doesn't typically ask me how much it's going to cost because he knows I have fair prices. But he told me that there was a hardware store 5 minutes down the road. When I typed it into my phone, when I got back to the vehicle, I typed it in. While it technically was 5 minutes, there's a million lights in the city and you end up waiting a lot longer than 5 minutes. So I got about 5 minutes down the road and realized, what happens if I get here and they don't have the piece that I need? Because the tailpiece was like a 12-inch tailpiece. And sometimes you see those at little hardware stores and sometimes you don't. And immediately I kept thinking, well, what's going to happen if I don't? And then I have to go somewhere else. It's just going to add more time. So I immediately looked to see if there was a Home Depot that was near, and there was, but it was in the opposite direction. And it said it was 15 minutes in the opposite direction. So I turn around, start heading that way. It did not take 15 minutes. It took like 25 minutes just because there's so many lights. This past week, it was extremely hot outside, and that added a lot of extra traffic and stress and frustration with other drivers. So by the time I got down to Home Depot, I had spent like 25 minutes actually getting down there. Got the stuff that I needed. The Home Depots in the city are set up so much different than the ones down here in the suburbs. They have the way they check out, the way they have their exits and entrances. You cannot go through any door except the entrance to get into the building. And you have to go out a very specific way. It's a thing, but it adds more time. It's not as quick as going into one of the ones here in the suburbs. I guess is the best way to put it. It's also just busier. I mean, like, I think that Home Depot is probably one of the busiest in the country because it is. I think there's only a couple that are in the city, and that one is on the south side, and it just is slammed. There's not another Home Depot for a pretty decent stretch of space. I know there's a Lowe's, but again, it's not super real close. So anyway, got back, did the repairs. The repairs went smoothly. There was no issues, got that stuff taken care of. So that job ended up being $240. Now, the thing from that was that I had to then drive to the property turnover, and the property turnover was like 40 minutes because it was like down and around to get back to where I needed to go. So get there, the helpers had already started painting the ceilings. I think that specific day, I swapped out the first exhaust fan in the first bathroom. I'm not going to list everything. I already gave you a list of everything that we needed to do. I'm just going to bring up things that came up as, things of note that came up. There's a couple of things that we recognized quickly. One, I think the refrigerator is bad. When we plugged in the refrigerator, it kept tripping the GFCI outlet, which means there's something wrong with the refrigerator. That's outside my control because I don't fix refrigerators, but also it wasn't even brought to my attention that there was an issue with the refrigerator to begin with. The outlet itself works fine. It's not an outlet issue, so it's not, an issue that I have to take care of. However, the property manager does need to be informed about the refrigerator not working so that way they can get that thing replaced. I think that was the only thing that really came up. I mean, really, it was just getting things slowly taken care of. We swapped out a couple of the light fixtures that day. When I say I did that while my helpers were basically painting. And then we had to do a patch. We had to do a little bit more drywall patch for those mirrors. But that was basically it. But these are long days. I mean, in some cases, we don't leave. And I know there's plenty of people who are going to work later than this, but we typically don't work past 4. It's just what we do. Part of it is because I sometimes have things with my kids that I need to get back to the house. So I have to get them to something. And that's just how I've structured it. Now, when I don't have the helpers, there could be a scenario where I do work later if there's not something. But as we get closer to the end of summer and getting into the fall, my youngest son starts football. My daughter starts flag football. There's a lot of juggling parts when it gets to moving stuff like that. So before anybody sits there and says, well, hey, you could always work longer hours, I completely acknowledge that. That's one of the number one things that I created this business so that I didn't have to work longer hours, was so that I would have time for the things that I need to make time for my family. So just keep that in mind before you roast me in the comments about how I get off of work too early. So then that said, that was basically Tuesday. Moving over to Wednesday, we had the lit tip meeting in the morning. After that, there was a new customer who contacted me about a property. It's a large building that has 17 total units. Most of them are studios or one bedrooms. And it's a very unique setup. You would not guess there's 17 units from the outside of the building, that's for sure. But basically, he wanted me to come out to basically meet him, have a conversation with him. He's the owner of the building. He's also technically the property manager. Or I guess he's more of a landlord than anything else. He does have a property manager, but it's just a realtor. And I think it's because she helps facilitate showings and getting the units on the market and things like that. So he wanted me to walk through a couple units to give him an idea on cost of certain things. Basically, he wants my company to take over the maintenance on the building, mostly because he has had some issues with reliability in the past. Based off of the conversation, it seems as if they were also taking advantage of him because some of the prices that he was saying he was paying was kind of nuts for the level of quality, at least that I was seeing. That's not to say that, that people were ripping him off, but when I told him how much it would cost to flip a specific unit, he looked at me and thought that was too cheap. And there was hardly any work that needed to get done. So it was very difficult to sit there and be like, I'm not sure. He also had this mentality of like, what is the price of turning over the unit? And I said, well, it depends on what needs to be done. And he said, right. But how much is it going to cost to turn over the unit? I said, it depends on what you need to get done. And I got this impression that he was paying someone to basically go in there, a flat fee to turn over the unit, but it may or may not include certain things. Like it may include replacing cabinets, which obviously adds a larger cost, but it may not. And if it doesn't, then why are you paying for something like that? So I informed him that like, if I was to go into a unit and turn it over, I do an inspection. I tell him exactly what's going to be done. If he wants anything done on top of that, then I add it to the overall workload and then price him off of that. It's not a flat cost across the board. I understand that property managers would love, and this isn't about him, but it's more about the same thing with the other property manager. Property managers would love if you just had a flat cost of going in there and doing that. But that doesn't make any sense because either you're ripping off the property manager because you're always overcharging, or you're undercharging and you're really hoping that it's all going to balance out in the end. I don't like that approach at all. I don't want to be in a scenario where I work an extremely large amount in one unit and then the next unit I don't work anything, but I'm charging the exact same. Because how do you have, in my mind, if you're an owner here and the owner here, and then somehow you find you don't know this because I don't know this, the property manager knows it, but the property manager's told this owner, this unit's going to cost $5,000 to turn over. Okay. Then the next unit has very little work that needs to be done, and that also is going to cost $5,000. Well, what happens when this is the same exact owner and he owns this building and this building? Well, that becomes a problem because what ends up happening is they start questioning why they're getting charged $5,000 for this one. Then they automatically want the lower price. Well, the problem is that this one's paying for that one. I don't like that. That's not the way I do what I do. I price it according to what needs to be done. So that being said, we walked through the unit. There was a slight hiccup because one of the units we needed to walk through, there was an issue with the tenant. that there was a dispute with the landlord. I'm not going to go into crazy details, but the landlord decided to call the police. The police got involved, and I had to basically sit there in case he needed me as a witness. Nothing actually happened as far as like breaking the law. It was the landlord felt like he was being threatened, but there was no like legitimate threat that the police could actually do anything about. So that being said, he also told me at the time that he was fielding another company potentially to do the work at the property as well. I said, that's fine. I completely understand people shopping around. It's not a big deal. Well, apparently either that company never even showed up or he didn't like them, because when I received a phone call on Thursday that basically said, hey, you're my guy. I want you to do the work. And here's the first thing I need you to do. And I explained to him that, he had this impression that somehow I was going to be able to come over and do it right away. And that wasn't the case. The case was that, I could get out there next week to do it. But what he wants done was something that was supposed to be done 3 weeks ago. That is not my fault that it was supposed to be done 3 weeks ago. I just met him this week. So I explained that, we could get it done, but it's going to obviously take a little bit of time to get over there and get it done. So that said, we'll see what happens with that. I have this strange suspicion that they're not going to mesh well with the way we do things, because he's used to doing things a very different way. And I'm only able to move a little bit in certain directions as far as like getting things taken care of. When you have something that you have 3 weeks to get taken care of, you had somebody who couldn't get it taken care of in 3 weeks. You can't go to the next guy and say you need to get it done within the next 2 days. That's just not feasible. The other problem is the thing he wants done right away is a giant patch on the ceiling, which when I looked at it, there was just globs of stuff all over the place. It's a mess. And it's gonna take some time to try to get that to be set in a way that is acceptable. So we'll see what happens with that. After that took forever. I mean, I was supposed to be there for maybe an hour. I ended up being there for 2.5 hours, and I'm not getting paid anything. So that's the thing that those are the situations that like probably are more frustrating than anything, is that when you're sitting there and you're not making any money. After that, we went to back to the property turnover. Same thing, just getting more work done. The employees were there pretty much from lunch onward, because Monday through Wednesday they were only able to work from lunch until the end of the day. And that was Wednesday. Thursday was basically just the property turnover for the employees. They started much earlier that day. All 3 of them were there. I didn't say this earlier, but Monday it was just 2 of them. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday it was all 3 of them. Friday was 2 of them. So that's put out there. I had a estimate in the morning specifically to look at some railings. A customer had a front porch, concrete porch with an overhang. There's railings on the front. They're all wood. The posts are currently wrapped in a PVC material. The PVC is flaking off and not in great shape, and the wood is starting to rot. So all the railings need to be replaced and the posts need to be rewrapped. That customer, interestingly, also complimented the AI stuff that I had and my software and all of that stuff that he was able to use to get a request in to me. I'm not sure if this project's going to pan out. I'm going to give him a ballpark and see where it goes from there. But to be honest, the way he was specifically talking, it seemed as if he had already found another company to do the work, which is completely understandable. I honestly don't really want to take on this work because I have just too many other things flowing around right now, and he has a very specific timeline of wanting to get it done by the end of the summer, or as he put it, as soon as possible, but by the end of the summer. He did admit that they should have looked into this back in April and they didn't, but customers have expectations and you have to figure out how to get those expectations to line up with reality. So after I went to the railing and checked out those, went back to the property turnover, or not back, I met the helpers over at the property turnover. This day we were trying just to get like a lot of things set. There was a lot of movement that day. One of the helpers was cleaning the basically scrubbing everything down in the kitchen, cleaning out the inside of the cabinets, wiping everything down. And then the other two were just painting nonstop, painting ceilings, painting walls, getting a lot of that stuff set. It's funny because in the beginning, you always see this when you're like, if you've ever watched an episode of any of the flip shows on HGTV, there's always like this, like whenever they show the timeline, it's like week 1, week 2, and you're looking around, you're like, nothing's happened, nothing's really working. It's because when you have a larger project, now this is a larger project for me because it's a full week, but you have to break it up. Like if you had a house that you had to completely flip, you might have 5-6 weeks. In my case, I had a house that I needed to turn over in about 5-6 days. So you have to figure out, the first day is really just prepping everything, figuring out exactly what you need, materials, getting all that stuff right away. The second day is more of a demo, get things set, but you're still just trying to get things moving forward. The third day, you're starting to put some stuff together, but most of it's just continuously getting it. Then all of a sudden, as soon as the paint starts going on the walls, it starts flying. It's kind of nuts how much it feels gets done when you're painting, but it's not that there's really that much more going on. It's just that it's more noticeable. It's definitely more noticeable. So we had pretty much a good chunk of what needed to get done on Thursday. What was left was cleaning the whole house, touch up paints throughout. There was an exhaust fan that still needed to be replaced, and then basically just putting all of the small things, the smoke detectors, the swapping out some of the outlets, things like that. That was all the stuff that was left that we needed to do on Friday. So on Friday, I had a small punch list to go look at in the morning for a member of my LaTip chapter. A lot of the stuff that he wanted done, I couldn't even do. He had the one thing that he wanted, or the few things that he wanted advice on, was he had some spots on his, like pitting spots in his concrete in certain spots, and he was looking to like patch it. Well, you really can't patch that without cutting up that entire piece of concrete. I know it doesn't look great, but there's not a lot you can do. I've got a piece of concrete on my driveway that's got a big crack through it, and there's nothing I can do about that. You could fill the crack in with products that, are not super noticeable, but in most cases, they're always going to be they're going to draw more attention to it. The other thing he had was he had some panels on his garage door that were bent. I don't do anything with garage door panels, so I couldn't help him with that. And the other two things he had was he had some loose outlets and switches in his basement, and then he had some LVP in his kitchen that there was gaps that were starting to show. So those are the two things I'll probably end up taking care of. Probably going to try to get out there next week just to get it taken care of, so that way he is happy, because he also asked me about this like 2 weeks ago, and I had a hard time making time to get over there. So that was that. So then after that, I met the employees at the property turnover, and we basically just wrapped everything up. There's just one thing that's left that needs to be done, and it was because there isn't the drawer pullout for the garbage cans was broke. The brackets that were in place were not something that I could reuse if I put in new drawer slides. So because of that, I was in a scenario where I had to order basically a whole new bracket system to work. The quickest one, and this was my mistake. I should have thought about this on the first day that I was there, and I probably would have had it in time, but I didn't think about figuring out what exactly I needed until I think it was Tuesday night. And then when I started thinking about it, I was like, okay, I got to get this ordered. I picked up drawer slides from Home Depot. They sat in my car, and I did not even think about it at all on Wednesday. And when I got there on Thursday, I immediately was like, okay, I need to get this cabinet taken apart, because one of the helpers was going to be cleaning up all the cabinets. So I wanted to get it taken apart. When I took it apart, that's when I realized I couldn't use the drawer slides. And at that point, it was Thursday. So my only solution at that point was to find what I needed, but the quickest I could get it was Sunday. So I will have to go back there, and that's the one thing that's going to hold up getting paid, is I need to get back there and get that replaced or installed. Now, it won't take that long, but it will suck because it's 35 minutes there, 35 minutes back this direction. Yeah, but I'll have to take care of that one of these mornings while the employees are at football practice, because the other employee who's not in football, he's out of town this week. He's actually out of town, I think, the next 2 weeks. So it's just the two football players, one of them being my son. They will be coming, obviously, wherever we're going after football practice. But we also have some rain in the forecast this week, too. So I really have to plan out things very well, because we can't afford to have any jobs that are rained out completely. It's just not a feasible thing to do, and I can't have them on site for something that I don't need them on site for if it's not necessary. I can't afford to have them on site if there's not if it's not a larger project. So that's something I have to make the schedule for this week, and I really have to balance that stuff out. So, so the biggest thing is total for the week. It is not a great number. 815 is probably, actually looking back at my numbers, that might be the lowest week I've had ever, since I started doing This Week in the Field. If I'm looking at all of this, I think we've never had a week that has been that low. The one week that I had that was relatively low was 1355, and that was the lowest. So definitely not a lot of money coming in, which, as you can imagine, creates a certain level of stress about how you can take care of everything. Luckily, I do have a little bit of money sitting in the accounts from the jobs that have been previously done. But again, there's just a lot going on. When a lot of these larger things get done, there will be a bunch of money coming into the accounts. I still have to pay for payroll even before I get, obviously, the money for some of these larger jobs. So that's something. Now, obviously, next week's total is going to include this property turnover, which will then make it a humongous week, probably the biggest week we've ever had. Looking over my other weeks, the largest week we ever had was 9,400, and that was also because we had multiple jobs that were done at a specific time. It could be higher than that, to be honest. We'll see what happens, but based off of the wrapping up the property turnover and a couple of the other things that I know we have to do this week, it could come close to being the largest week ever. Now, again, this is why you can't focus on the individual weeks. While you look at that number and it's something that you need to be concerned with, especially if you have multiple weeks that are only that much money coming in, that could be a problem. With the property managers, I don't get milestone payments. That becomes a problem when you don't have those milestone payments. When you have other larger projects, I purposefully try to make sure that I have milestone payments so that there's money flowing in. Because if there's no money flowing in, you're not going to be able to continue to do what you need to do. There's only so much credit that you can use, and eventually that credit has to get paid. If something gets hiccuped, where you are supposed to be working on a project for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, something happens where you have to have a delay, where you're not going to get paid for a little bit because you're waiting on something that it's outside your control. If you didn't have any milestone payments prior to that, you could be waiting a couple of weeks for something that you don't have you can't do anything about. And that would be a huge problem. So when I do have larger projects, I ensure that I'm getting milestone payments so that there is money in the accounts if necessary. I have reserve accounts that I keep things in, but again, those only go so far too. So you don't want to be in a scenario where having to dip into those accounts if you don't have to. You have to plan things smart. The last thing I want to talk about is stuff related to the business. The business coaching thing this week was basically just talking. He had a guest on who basically talked about incentivizing and investing in your team. Didn't super pertain to me. However, I will say I did take two of the employees out for lunch on Friday because it was just Friday, and I figured it's been a bit since we had lunch. And the other employee had already gone out of town. So that happened. Now, that's not specifically related to the business coaching call, but I completely understand from the perspective of a business coach, you have to invest in your team. You have to have your team. You have to build that loyalty with your team. And one of the ways you can do that is by incentivizing them and investing in them. I'm not in a great scenario because my investment is just making sure that my helpers do a great job while I have them. I only have them for like 4 more weeks. After that, I will be back by myself until I find the correct person to work alongside me or work with the business, not alongside me long term. So the problem is that juggling that stuff, it sometimes creates, not juggling, getting off track here. Essentially what I'm meaning to say is there's a level of investment when it comes to seasonal employees, and then there's a level of investment related to permanent employees. I would love to have a permanent employee to then worry about the investment into those permanent employees, but that is not something that I have right now. So that's that. The other thing I want to talk about is material delays. So I had 2 jobs recently that I ran into this massive problem, and I'm like it was outside my control, but they're both the exact same thing, and it's material delays. The second week of June, I ordered custom shutters from Home Depot. They get them sourced from an outside company, and when they source them, they will then directly ship them to you. This was for a job for a member of my Latip chapter. I think it's her sister's house. And basically what happened was the shutters I ordered, they were supposed to arrive June 19th. To put in perspective, this week, July 19th passed or is about to pass. And we're a month out and I still haven't had them. So about 2 weeks ago, I reached out to Home Depot to see what's going on. Why is it still in processing and not been shipped, considering I was told it was going to ship within like 3 or 4 days. They didn't have an answer, and ultimately the answer became, after 2 weeks of them doing research, they were unable to get any sort of answer and decided to refund the shutters, and then on top of that, cancel the order. So now I have to source those shutters from a different avenue. Now, I luckily can get the exact same shutters from somewhere else. I think there is a price difference. It's probably going to cost me a little bit more. The part that's frustrating about that is that I didn't do anything wrong in this scenario. Now, at the same time, this customer is not complaining about this, but it makes me look bad if I don't follow up on these materials and then inform the customer of what's going on. The second scenario was about 3 weeks ago. I ordered some parts for a commercial door. Another customer, not related. He has a commercial building, and one of the units is owned by or rented by a baseball coaching, whatever it's called. They call it an academy, a school. And the door to the unit has had issues where the closers broke. Last year, I replaced the closer, and it's just so worn out that it just broke again. So my suggestion was to get the higher end, heavy duty commercial closer rather than the less expensive one that I put in last year. And then in addition to that, have a door stop to prevent it from being open too far. I ordered the parts from a website. And the website said that the items would typically arrive within 7 to 10 business days. It did not say anywhere on their website that the parts were not in stock. It did not say anywhere that there was a lead time of any specific amount of time. So I assumed that I was going to get these parts within 7 to 10 business days. And after 7 to 10 business days passed, nothing happened. To be fair, I did not reach out. I did have a thing where I had it on my list this week of needing to reach out to find out what the heck was going on with those parts. But the customer ended up contacting me earlier this week and said, hey, what's going on with the parts? And I thought you said it was going to take like 2 weeks. And I overestimated. I said 7 to 10 business days was the listing, but I told the customer it was going to take 2 to 3 weeks before I could get out there to replace it because of the lead time. I gave myself leeway, and I still got screwed by the materials not showing up. Long story short, the company that I ordered the parts from, out of nowhere, they tried to call, didn't leave a message, and then sent me an email saying, we've noticed an issue with your order. Please give us a call during business hours. Now, in the grand scheme of things, if you own a company that sells parts, regardless of how many parts you sell, regardless of what it is, if you notice that there's a problem with a customer's order, why would you send an email and not say what the issue is with the order, but then tell the customer, hey, we're not telling you what the problem is, but instead we want you to call us within the confines of business hours in order to find out what the problem is. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world, and it frustrated me beyond belief. I, of course, when I got home that day and I had that email, I tried calling. Well, of course, they're located in New York, so they closed at 5, and it was already 5:30 my time. So that was helpful. I left a message. They did not return my phone call. I sent an email. They did not respond to the email. So I had to call again. So when I had to make a point to call during the day. When I called during the day, they transferred me to the second person and said, oh, so the problem with the order is that the parts have a lead time of 7 weeks. And one of the parts was discontinued, so we're not even sure if we can even get the part. So why did you have it listed on your website? Why did you have this item sold and then not know this for 3 weeks? How did you come to learn 3 weeks after I placed the order that this one part was potentially discontinued and the other part had a lead time of 7 weeks? So then I said, well, how come you didn't know about this 3 weeks ago? Their response was, we did. It was a 10-week lead time 3 weeks ago. Now it's a 7-week because you've already waited 3 weeks. At no point did you inform me about it being a 10-week lead time. That's the most ridiculous thing. When I said, how did you not know that you didn't have the part and it was going to be 10 weeks? Their response was, well, we sell over 2 million parts. We don't know what parts we have in stock. How do you run a business with 2 million parts and not know what you have in stock? That doesn't make any sense. You spent the last 3 weeks sending somebody up and down your inventory aisles trying to find the part that I ordered. There's no way that's true. That's the most ridiculous thing in the world. So basically, with the one part not being able to get and then waiting another 7 weeks, I was like, nope, not happening. I'm going to have to find a different solution. So I told them to cancel the order. Luckily, I was able to find the parts through a different supplier that I've used in the past, which maybe they weren't available a couple of weeks ago with them. But I ordered them on Thursday night. And guess what? They've already both been FedExed to me. They're on their way. They should arrive within the next couple of days. And it's like, again, part of this is using suppliers. It's not always the best idea to use the supplier that has the cheapest price. And I don't even know that that was actually the case with this scenario of whether or not it was actually the cheapest option. I just know for a fact that that was horrible customer service. Everything up and down was horrible customer service. Your website doesn't say there's that long of a lead time. You don't contact the customer for 3 weeks only to tell them that it's not going to be there forever because it's a discontinued item. And then the other item is going to take an additional 7 weeks. Why would you wait 3 weeks to tell somebody that? And sometimes I don't do a ton of commercial work, but when I have commercial work and I have to source some of these parts that are related to commercial materials, the parts are obviously more expensive. But in my mind, I just keep thinking, no wonder everybody gets so frustrated when you're at a business and something takes forever to get fixed. It's because it takes forever to get these parts. That said, the parts should be here, and I'll probably try to get out there at the end of this week at the very latest to get that taken care of. But again, these two situations, it's just beyond frustrating when it's stuff outside your control. The other one that was outside my control was being at that building review on Wednesday and then having to stick around because the landlord wanted to call the police and wanted me present to be a witness. It's not something I want to be involved in. I'm not getting paid to be a witness. I'm not getting paid anything to actually even look over any of this, but let's eat up a bunch of my time so that I don't have the time to come out and take care of what I need to get taken care of. So sometimes stress just comes. We all know that running a business, stress is a pain in the butt. Sometimes you could have weeks that just go super smooth. This week was not one of those weeks. So probably the title of this episode is going to be a stressful week outside my control or something like that, because a lot of this stuff, it just didn't work out it wasn't because of something that I purposefully did incorrectly. In some cases, there was some things that I brought on myself, as far as like not figuring out the cabinet pull-out part right away so that I could get it ordered. But some of this stuff, like I ordered the parts right away, it just didn't come. So yeah, that was this week. Not a lot of money coming in, lots of stress coming in, that's for sure. So hopefully you guys are enjoyed this this episode. With that being said, if you are interested in subscribing, we have new episodes coming out every Wednesday. Or I always say Wednesday, I'm not sure why, but we have new episodes of This Week in the Field coming out every Monday morning. In addition, we have other videos coming out on Thursdays. We're trying to do something new where we're focusing on a variety of different topics, doing a little bit more tool stuff, talking about stuff with the business, talking about things from a homeowner's perspective, as well as telling more stories about different things as well. So be sure to check those out on Thursdays. Leave comments. I do make sure that I respond to comments that have questions. So if you have a comment, be sure to ask it. And if it's a comment that warrants a larger topic that I can't just do in 1 or 2 sentences, I'll probably do a response video for it too. So leave those comments, like, subscribe, share with other people. And if anything, just let me know you guys are watching. I appreciate it. Looking forward to wrapping up some of this stuff that I've got going right now and getting some money coming in, so that way I don't have that level of stress just sitting on my shoulders. I do have big shoulders, but they can only hold so much. So with all that being said, you guys have been watching This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. I've been Dustin. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time.